The night was unusually quiet in the small suburban house where 12-year-old Jake lived with his parents. The quiet was abruptly shattered by a series of desperate screams coming from his parents' bedroom. Jake, who had been lying awake in his bed, jumped up in terror. His heart raced as he heard the muffled cries and thumping noises from the other room. Something was terribly wrong. Fearful and confused, Jake scrambled to his parents' bedroom door, but it was locked from the inside. He could hear his mother's voice pleading and his father's harsh replies. In a panic, he ran back to his room, his small feet pattering across the wooden floor. Jake dove under his bed, pulling a dusty blanket around him as a makeshift shield. The screams grew louder, then abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was oppressive and unsettling. Jake held his breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The house was eerily still. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching his room. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the door creaked open. The footsteps grew louder, and the distinct sound of army boots echoed through the hallway. Jake's pulse quickened. The footsteps entered his room, and a shadow fell across the space beneath the bed. A pair of army boots came into view, their polished surface gleaming in the dim light filtering through the dust-covered blinds. The boots stopped right beside Jake's hiding spot. He tried to stifle his sobs as the shadow loomed closer. Then, with a jarring motion, the man reached under the bed, grabbing Jake by the collar of his pajamas and yanking him out. Jake blinked in disbelief as he was dragged into the middle of the room. The man, clad in a tattered uniform, stared down at him with cold, unfeeling eyes. The room was dimly lit, and Jake could see the faint outlines of old furniture and forgotten relics. The man's face was hidden in the shadows, but his voice was chillingly clear. "We've been searching for you for 200 years, the man said, his voice a gravelly whisper. Jake's mind raced. The words didn't make sense. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step back, allowing Jake to get a better look at his surroundings. The room was filled with old photographs and dusty relics, giving it a strange, antiquated feel. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. In a sudden burst of clarity, Jake recognized the room. It was identical to his own, but it was filled with old-fashioned furnishings and decorations. Everything seemed out of place, as if the room had been frozen in time. Why are you doing this?" Jake stammered, his voice trembling. The man's gaze hardened. "You are the last of the line. We have been searching for you for centuries. Your family betrayed us, and now the bloodline must be restored." Jake's mind whirled. He couldn't understand what the man was saying. "I don't understand. My parents are in the other room. What happened to them?" A cold smile crept across the man's face. They were a necessary sacrifice. Their actions set things in motion, and now it's time for you to take your place. Before Jake could react, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, ornate box. He opened it, revealing an old, weathered locket. The locket was engraved with strange symbols, and as Jake looked closer, he felt a strange sensation wash over him, a sense of recognition and dread. The man held the locket up to Jake's face. "This will seal your fate. Embrace your destiny, or be condemned to wander in darkness." Jake's heart pounded as he looked at the locket. He realized that this was more than just a simple confrontation. It was a link to something far deeper and more sinister. The man's words echoed in his mind, blending with the memory of the screams and the darkness that had overtaken the house. Desperate to escape, Jake grabbed the locket and ran, pushing past the man and out of the room. He stumbled through the house, the oppressive silence now punctuated by distant, ghostly whispers. The walls seemed to close in on him as he raced for the front door, his only hope for escape. As Jake burst outside into the cold night air, he looked back at the house. The man stood at the window, his cold eyes watching Jake with an unsettling calm. The house, once his home, now loomed as a dark and forbidding presence. Jake fled into the night, his heart heavy with the weight of the man's words and the shadows of the past. He knew that his life had changed forever, and that the echoes of the past would continue to haunt him. The house remained behind him, a dark and silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded. Jake's life would never be the same, and the search for answers would lead him to uncover the dark history that bound his family to the haunted asylum. A group of close friends had gathered for a night of fun at Jake's house. It was supposed to be a casual evening of board games, laughter, and reminiscing about old times. As the night progressed, someone suggested playing Truth or Dare, a game that had always been a favorite among them. The group agreed, and they settled into a circle on the living room floor. The atmosphere was lighthearted and playful as the game began. Truths were answered with embarrassing honesty, and dares were performed with laughter and enthusiasm. The group, Jake, Lisa, Mark, Emily, and Sarah, was in high spirits, enjoying the nostalgic game. The room was dimly lit by a few scattered lamps and the flickering light of the TV playing in the background. The game was moving quickly, and everyone was eagerly awaiting their next turn. It was Lisa's turn to dare, and she decided to add a bit of excitement to the game. "I dare you all to turn off the lights for 10 seconds, Lisa announced with a mischievous grin. "No peeking, no cheating." The friends chuckled, and Jake moved to turn off the lights. The room was plunged into darkness, and the sound of nervous giggles filled the void. The darkness was absolute, and the friends' laughter faded into an uneasy silence. In those 10 seconds, a sudden piercing scream shattered the silence. The lights flickered back on, revealing a scene of chaos. Lisa was lying on the floor, her face contorted in terror, her body still. The friends rushed to her side, but it was clear that Lisa was dead. Panic erupted among the group. They scrambled to make sense of what had just happened. There was no sign of an intruder, and the house's doors and windows were securely locked. The police were called, and the friends were questioned, but no concrete answers emerged. It seemed as if the darkness had concealed a deadly secret. As the investigation dragged on, the friends became increasingly paranoid and distraught. They replayed the events of that night over and over, trying to understand how such a tragedy could have occurred. Each friend began to suspect the others, their relationships strained by suspicion and fear. Jake, particularly affected by Lisa's death, became obsessed with uncovering the truth. He spent sleepless nights researching old newspapers, looking into the house's history, and trying to find any clues that might explain what had happened. During his investigation, Jake discovered that the house had a dark past. Years ago, it had been the site of a series of mysterious disappearances, all linked to a similar game of Truth or Dare played by previous occupants. The pattern seemed too coincidental to ignore. Desperate for answers, Jake decided to conduct his own investigation. He recreated the conditions of that fateful night, including the power outage, and invited the remaining friends to participate. His goal was to uncover the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. On the night of the reenactment, the friends gathered in the living room, the atmosphere heavy with tension. Jake turned off the lights, and once again, the room was enveloped in darkness. The friends waited anxiously, the silence stretching on. Suddenly the room was filled with an eerie chill. A cold, whispering voice seemed to echo through the darkness. The friends' breaths became shallow, and they could hear the sound of shuffling footsteps moving around the room. When the lights came back on, one of the friends was missing. The remaining friends searched frantically, their fear mounting with each passing minute. The missing friends' belongings were found scattered around the house, but there was no sign of their whereabouts. Jake was left alone, his mind racing with horror and confusion. He realized that the game had claimed another victim, and the cycle of terror was far from over. The house seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, feeding off the fear and anguish of its occupants. In the aftermath, the remaining friends were left to grapple with the consequences of the night's events. The police continued their investigation, but the case remained unresolved, shrouded in mystery and darkness. Jake, now deeply traumatized, moved away from the house, leaving behind the memories of that fateful night. The house stood empty, a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The legend of the deadly game of truth or dare lived on, a chilling reminder of the night when darkness revealed its true nature. The story of the game and its victims became a local legend, a haunting tale of suspense and terror. And though the house eventually found new occupants, the echoes of that night lingered, a reminder of the darkness that can lie hidden in the simplest of games.